Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Vintage Books Live. I am Christy Peterson from Vintage Books. Tonight we have Karen DeWitz. Karen's book just came out today. This is is it your second book?
My second book.
Okay. It's a second book that we've gotten at the store, but then as soon as I was going to say that, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not her second book. Maybe there are more that I don't know about. But
Right.
it's called Let's Visit the Beach.
It's actually, sorry, I
Let's
am
go to
going to
the
jump
beach.
in.
Let's explore the
Let's
beach.
explore the
There
beach.
we go. I got most of it
Probably
right.
going to be flipped. Is it flipped? It doesn't
No, it's
matter.
perfect.
Explore
It's
the beach.
not. It's actually it's
Okay.
fine. Um, and it's about visiting Northwest beaches, which is exciting. I love to see the books that are about our local species. And it is a kid's book. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's technically a kid's book, although we'll expand on this in a little bit, but I definitely think it's for a lot of different ages because it has so much good information in. But first I want to just ask you, how did you come? So you've got this book, and she also has a book called Look at That Bird, which we had in the store a couple of Christmases ago and people really enjoyed. Um, how did you come to be writing these really gorgeous photo-based nonfiction picture books or nonfiction books for kids?
Well, that's a good question. It kind of grew out of the photography, really. Okay, I'll have to go back. I have a background in education. I was a teacher. I have a master's degree in education. So I do a lot of work with kids in different settings. I have a history with the outdoor school program here in Oregon,
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
teaching out in the forest. And I mean, that's the best kind of learning for kids. And I took a really twisty route after I was teaching, and I've done a whole bunch of things. But over the last decade or so, I've been working as a photographer, and I had a whole lot of pictures of were birds. So we started with birds and birding and getting kids into birding and learning the things about birding that makes it cool. Even if you didn't think you cared about it, that was what the first book was. And then this one, it's just working with the publisher and saying, okay, I'm still taking and these are the I'm interested in. I love going outdoors. Grew up, but both of my parents are from the beach, and that's what we do. We go to the beach all the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, you get the pictures and then you get curious and you learn about things and you want to share it with kids because the more curious kids are getting, the more they
Yeah.
get outside, the more they care.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How did you get hooked up with your publisher in the first place for the bird book? Like, did they approach you because of the photos, or did you query them at all, or?
I did. I did a proposal, and I they have an acquisitions editor worked through, and she presented to the rest of the publisher, and they decided they'd go with it. They trusted
All
her,
right.
and she liked my work. And then so part of the contract of the first book was that they would have at least right of refusal over the next like 5 books ish
Oh,
that
cool. That's nice. Yeah,
there may
that's
be
very
more,
cool.
ideally.
Yay, that's exciting.
So if everybody goes and buys this,
Yeah, everybody go.
yeah,
Um, can you show us this book a little bit? I know you
sure.
have, so maybe show a couple pages. Because it's so visual that
It
it doesn't
is.
really do it justice just to talk about it.
Um, well,
And
and
then
one thing,
we,
can I tell you a little bit about how this is
oh,
set up?
please do. Yes.
So technically, mostly because publishers they make you pick a lane. It's technically for ages 8 to 12, but what I found with the bird book is style is and when I was teaching, my teaching style was I don't talk down to kids, I don't talk down to
Yeah.
adults, I
Yeah.
just talk. And so if I find something fascinating and fun, um, I'm gonna explain it in a way that I think is like, oh my gosh, this is so
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they
Yeah.
look
Sorry.
at guidebooks, they read like Ripley's Believe It or Not, kind of,
Yes. Yeah.
every species, every animal, everything in it is like, and guess what? This has this weird,
Yeah. Look at
and
this.
that's what I loved doing with the bird book is like weird. Who knew? And
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
with this one. And so this book is actually divided up into three sections. The first is tide pools, and that talks about all the different critters that live in the tide pools. And then the second section is kind of beach, so all the things that don't live in
Yeah.
the tide pools that on the
Yeah.
sand. And section is beach birds. So it goes back to kind of my roots with birds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now we're doing pelicans and murres and pigeon guillemots and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So
And that was one thing that I was noticing as I was flipping through it today is it is perfect for middle grade. And we can talk in a minute about what makes it a middle grade book, but I certainly will like shelve it. I tend to take liberties with
for
in
sure.
the store, at least when I can get away with it with like age delineations, because I feel like a lot of times when you write a book for, say, middle grade or YA, it really is great for adults who are beginning something. Uh,
Absolutely. That's the whole point. I mean, if you
yeah, yeah,
either of the books, it's all information with no barrier to entry. You don't
yeah.
need to know anything to get started reading it. And when you read a regular, I don't mean to say this is irregular, when you read, like, there are a lot of beach
Very
guides,
highly irregular.
right? Super irregular. But I mean, there are a lot of beach guides out there that you
Yeah,
pick them up
yeah,
and it's super dry and you have
yeah,
to know some basic stuff before it even makes
yes,
sense in your
yeah,
brain. And since this is written so that you don't need to know anything, it can work for middle grades, it can work for YA. But honestly, I have a huge contingent of like 80 something year old fans that are like,
yeah,
I want to learn
yeah,
this stuff and I don't want to feel stupid reading the book. But then
yes,
I
yeah,
also have people who read it to their 5 year olds and they get it too.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
kind of yeah,
yeah.
you can
And
shelve
I
it.
would love to, I would actually love to see more nonfiction marketed that way because I mean I'm a non opinionated nonfiction writer, but I would just love to see that because I think that a lot of times, particularly people who maybe don't think of themselves as highly educated, don't think of themselves even as readers sometimes, like the adult nonfiction can throw up barriers. Uh,
Absolutely.
and not intentionally, and not to say that they're badly written or they aren't wonderful, but when you're brand new to something, sometimes there's lingo that you don't even think about, maybe the editor didn't think about or whatever. I it when in my head what pops in there is when I was trying to learn to knit and I kept checking out adult books from the library and going, I don't know what they're saying. And I finally
Like,
bought a kid's book and then I could figure it out.
well, and
And
the thing,
so,
I totally agree 100%. And one of the things about my books is I don't feel like they feel very much like a kid's book.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, not that they wouldn't be interesting to kids either. They are. I mean, just in terms of like the information is so cool and there's so
yeah,
much like that
yeah,
nobody would know, but super fun for the adults in the kids' lives to learn new things. I mean, even a person, my dad was born and raised in Seaside, Oregon, okay, and knows more about the beach and is super active with the land conservancy down there. There are things he had no idea. He's like going,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
What is that? I've
yeah,
never seen that before. And so, if I can get to the adults, if I can get to the kids, get
yeah,
everybody to slow down, look carefully, and realize all of the diversity that's out there. It's insane.
yeah. So let's talk about like you're writing it for middle grade though.
Yeah, I
And
did. To be
what so that people understand like we're all plugging this for an adult book, and I absolutely do think it's so accessible and wonderful for adults. But talk to me about, as a nonfiction writer, like, what are you thinking about when you are writing the book that makes it, I mean, like, what choices are you making? What are you thinking about? What
sure.
organizational choices are you making that make it a book for, like grades 4 through 8 or somewhere
Those
in
are
there?
Really good questions. Well, first of all, you have to think about language and be clear. I mean, the best writing for anybody has clear language, but for especially middle grade readers who are past the point of learning to read and into the point of reading to learn,
Yeah.
you need to have super clear language that you can follow from point A to point B and not get lost in the fanciness of it all.
Yeah.
So I tend to be pretty direct in how I say things. And if I think something is a maybe more elevated concept or a little bit more difficult, I'll explain it. I do try to explain things with an eye to the truth of the thing, um, without getting into too much depth. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had to explain a lot of people in the bird book. One of the things that I had requests for after the fact was we'd like to see the scientific names. Okay, and I'm not meaning to say those aren't good. In beach stuff, a lot more people use the scientific names than, like, in birds. Everybody uses the common bird
Yeah.
names
Yeah.
typically rather than the scientific names. But in the beach stuff, you've kind of got a mix. You've got 50-50 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a request for me to put the scientific names. So if I'm going to put in a long scientific name about something,
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
explain to kids, okay, this is a scientific name. How is that different than the common name? And what is it? And so
Yeah.
simplifying that down so you don't have to explain taxonomy to, a potential
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
old. We don't want to get into the college level stuff, but just saying, yeah, in common names, for example, if you look at like a starfish, okay, that people would call it a starfish. Well, first of all, most scientists go, hey, that's not a fish. It's not called a starfish, it's a sea star. Okay, so there's already a problem with the common noun,
Yeah.
common
Yeah.
name for it. But then also, a starfish can be a lot of different animals. There are a ton of different sea stars that all fall under that kind of big umbrella.
Yeah.
So the purpose, and that's kind of what I do for kids, is I go, okay, the purpose of a scientific name is you've got kind of the bigger group and then a specific, and it tells you something about the animal. And every single living thing on the planet has one name that's just theirs, and that differentiates it from a common name. So that's the kind of
Yeah.
explanation
Yeah.
that I would give to kids that maybe I wouldn't put in an adult book, but then that also makes it understandable a little bit for everybody.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but another thing is, and I bring this up a couple times in the book, is that even the scientific names, the way science works, it's not a one and done situation, right?
Mm-mm.
So as we learn more, as scientists get out there and do things, scientific names change, things get recategorized. And so spending a lot of time getting lost in the specifics of that isn't really where I want kids to go with
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
just to know this exists, these names exist, this is why they exist. So that's the thing that I would do.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
I try to pick photographs that tell a story or add to the story. So they're sometimes you'll get like a typically in field guides, maybe the pictures are sometimes not as clear representations of what you're going to see in the field, or don't represent like the concept that you're trying to get across. And that, I
Yeah.
think, for
Yeah.
kids, they really need that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we can move on to another thing, but
I'm
those are a
no,
couple
this is perfect.
I
I'm
learned.
guessing that being now, I assume are all the pictures in the book yours, or is it a mix?
I took all of the pictures in actually both of my books, except in this book, I will admit, there is, and I should know which page it's on, there is one picture that I did not take, and it is of plankton. And the reason I did not
Oh,
take
well,
it is
yes.
because
That would be a little
I,
hard.
I don't do the microscopic
Yeah,
photography,
yeah.
and it's one of my like New Year's resolution type things. It's like, yeah, let's learn
Ooh,
how to do that,
yay.
but it wasn't in time for this. So I do have one
Yeah,
not neat photo,
yeah,
but there are over 300 full color pictures in the book,
yeah,
and so I feel like I'm 299 of them. So
yeah. That's pretty good.
yeah, not bad.
Yeah, no, I think that all this is really interesting, and I honestly think that sometimes that's why kids' books end up being such good resources for adults is that we as nonfiction kids writers are trying really hard not to make the reader feel dumb for not knowing. Like
Oh
we're
yeah.
just matter of factly explaining, well, this is what this thing is. And you're trying not to load it up with too many layers so that they have to know all this back material to know what you're talking about. And so inevitably for an adult reader, it's the same thing. Like you can learn what a scientific name is if you never knew without feeling dumb that you didn't
Right.
know what a
And
scientific
again,
name
I
is.
mean, I don't
So
get
yeah.
into, there is a very specific reason for things, but I basically am
Oh
like,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
this big long, and this is what it's for.
yeah.
Not as much into like, this is the genus and this is the species, and that's what the,
Yes.
because it's unnecessary at
Yes.
this point.
Yeah.
It's like, it's at the, what I'm hoping is if they get to this book and they get seeing the things and they get excited about the
Yeah.
things and they say,
Yeah.
oh, that's something. And then as they go along, they can learn more. They can go
Yeah.
find out. They can research and that's something that they will learn later on if they take more classes and
Yeah.
things, because I just don't want to overwhelm kids. I want
Exactly.
them to get the
Exactly.
cool stuff. But I
Yeah.
mean, even like
You
the
want them to get
times,
excited about it without getting bored because it's like too
exactly.
much information. Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
say one of the hard things about writing for kids about complex topics, and this is actually one of my favorite things about writing for kids,
Yeah.
nonfiction, is taking a complex topic and simplifying it without dumbing it down and without making it incorrect. And I have a lot of experts that I go to in the process of writing to double check and make sure that I haven't, sometimes when you say something in a really
Yeah.
simple
Yeah. Oh
way,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's I remember in the bird book, my son is a mechanical engineer and I ran him by one paragraph that I was working on, and he was studying physics at the time in college, and I said, okay, this thing I wrote about these feathers and talking about or something about the birds seeing in the ultraviolet. And I said, if I say that's beyond the purple end of the rainbow, and he's like, not exactly, like, so we had to
Yeah.
talk through it to
Yeah.
pick exactly the right words so
Yes.
that it would,
Yes.
we're talking about violet being a light color instead of like a pigment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you don't lose the truth of it. You can't, the worst thing you could do is give kids a resource that isn't correct.
Yeah.
And that is, yeah. So we made sure that didn't
Well,
happen.
and I think one of the things that I find most fascinating is how many things that we were taught that
Oh,
are
yeah,
just flat wrong. And some
absolutely.
of them, they just weren't explained well. And so you get this completely wrong idea. But sometimes it's because there's really no better way to explain it. And
Definitely. Sometimes.
I have tried my hand at like a few of them, like, okay, I can do this, and you get to the end and you go, okay, I understand why it gets explained this way because
Right.
it gets a piece of it and the rest of it is just like, but I actually think that's one of my favorite things about writing nonfiction for kids is getting your head
Absolutely.
around that super complex thing and being like, okay, I'm gonna wrestle this until I can explain
Until
it.
it's correct and I've
Yeah,
got this
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Exactly. I mean, it's like
exactly.
the basic thing, like in the beginning of the book, I talk about what high and low tides are and how to look
That's
for it and
incredibly
what
difficult.
causes them. And it's like, you know what? I would say a lot of the adults don't know why we have
Yeah,
high and low
yeah,
tides. And I
yeah,
mean, but simple drawing of, you've got the earth, which is a circle, and
yeah,
then you've got the water, which is a little stretchier than the rock of the earth. And so the gravity of the sun and the moon, mostly the moon because it's closer, pull the water, so there's a bulge at both
yeah,
ends, and then the
yeah,
earth just spins in it, and it goes in and out of, like, there's a shallow part and a deeper part and a
yeah,
shallow part and a
yeah,
deeper part.
yeah,
And I think that's well within kids' ability to
yeah,
get
yeah,
and to realize something that is complex
yeah.
that you can simplify.
That the one that was actually one that one of my editors went back and forth on was because you have the whatever side's on the moon, but then you have the opposing one on the other side, and that's
And
the
there's
one
a
that you're
whole,
like, how do I
yeah,
explain this?
again, it's like, and I ran this by all of my physics people, that it's like, it's okay for kids
Yes,
to
yes,
not
yeah,
understand
yeah,
the opposing bulge, as
yeah.
long as they see that
And
this
you can
happens.
kind of get in the weeds trying to be like, I'm gonna conquer this. And then
Right.
you realize really all they need to know is that it's the moon acting on the water,
Exactly.
and that it's not like a matter of your honor if you can't look
Right.
at
Well, and
the
as
other
long
side.
as kids, in my head, as long as they understand um that it's not that the water is moving like out and back in, it's that the earth is rotating in. I mean, to me, that's just super
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
and
yeah,
fascinating. And the goal, like with the book, is to give them the super cool and fascinating over.
yeah.
I found like when I was doing the section on nudibranchs, which are like the coolest things in the world,
Yes.
they're sea slugs, and there are so many different nudibranchs in Oregon, in Washington,
Yeah.
in all along the Pacific, and I was talking about them and writing, and I really had to ratchet myself back. It's like you can get, I mean, I could write a book this thick on each species of
Yeah.
nudibranch. And
Yeah.
so at a
Yeah.
certain point, you have to say, I am going to tell you things that are correct at a level, and then you will know that nudibranchs exist. And hold on, just because we've got people in here who don't have the book, and I have big
Oh,
posters
yes.
for things
Yeah.
that I'm gonna do presentations in live. But do you see? Because this is
Yeah.
this too shiny?
It's not perfect. That's
Okay.
perfect.
That
There you
is
go. There you go.
This is a white and orange tipped nudibranch. It's a type of sea slug. And one of the common names for it is actually a candy corn nudibranch. And if you look at its little tips of
Oh
it,
yeah, look at that.
these are the coolest animals. And we have things that look like this. We have ones that have neon blue in them. We have some that look like lemons. We have some that are bright red that match bright red sponges that also exist on our shores. And just the I think that there are so many kids that run out onto the ocean and run out into the wilderness, and their parents and even beach people, even if you think I have been
Yeah.
tide pooling forever, you've missed something. I
Oh, for
promise
sure.
you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the thing. I want to get kids like super excited to go find these random, like, I mean, come on. These things
Yes.
are so
I know.
cool.
That's actually one of the things that I really want to see because I have not yet seen a nudibranch. A lot of the other stuff that's in the book I've
I will
seen,
tell
but
you a
those
secret.
two little guys I have
If
not.
you want to see a nudibranch, and again, they don't all look like that.
Yeah.
Look in the
There's all
book.
different
There are
ones.
all
Yeah.
kinds of different ones. But go to a place with both tide pools and rangers or volunteers, and there are places all up and down the Pacific coast that have that. Um, I'm trying to think. Larrabee, was that? Uh, anyway, there are
Yeah. Yeah.
state parks all throughout Washington, all throughout Oregon, that have human beings there who love to tell you things. And if you walk up to the very wonderful human beings and you say, hey, where are the nudibranchs? Have you seen any today? Especially, I'll be honest, if you go to
Yeah.
Cannon Beach, the Cannon Beach people, they wear these bright red coats. They're
Yes.
super
Yeah.
easy to pick them out.
Yeah.
And if you just go up to one of them and go, what's the coolest thing you've seen today? They'll take you
Yeah.
to it. Because if they're animals, they move. You won't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
see any, you don't know, but they can lead you there, and it's amazing. So go to Cannon Beach, go to
Yes.
Haystack
Go to the
Rock,
people.
walk up to the nice people in the red coats and say, I would really like,
I
and
really
oh,
want
and
to
they
see.
have something every year called the Nudibranch Safari at Haystack
Oh,
Rock,
cool.
and
Oh, I didn't
they
realize that.
it's really cool. They have a live stream also. So you can go and participate in person, or you can go to live stream, and they have experts, and
Looking for paper and pen.
find them. They find different nudibranchs and put them in little plastic things and let you like look at them in the water and then let them go again. It's very, very cool and worth a trip to the beach for sure.
Do you know if they have like some kind of website or anything for that
Um,
event?
I would Google nudibranch safari
Okay. Okay.
haystack rock, and
We
it,
will we will
yes,
link we will
it's like
link to that if
the
I can find it.
volunteers of Haystack Rock, or I should know that. I've thanked
That's
them in my
okay.
corporate
I'll
life.
find it and I'll
It's
link to
kind
it
of
for
great,
folks so that they
but
can
they're
go see
great.
it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have talked to the people in Cannon Beach just as a second. Yeah, I second that. I haven't asked them about nudibranchs. I definitely will be doing that.
If
But
you,
they are wonderful.
right, they're so
Whatever's cool that day, you
exactly,
will
and
see it. So,
and
yeah.
what's cool when you go see the nudibranchs and you know what you're looking for, you might see an even smaller creature, the things that they eat, and then the smaller creatures that they, and
Yeah.
it's all part of this cycle. When you look at a tide pool, when you look at the ocean, when you look at the beach, so much of it is actually alive, and you would just walk right
Yeah.
by and not even realize it, which is amazing to me.
So tell me about, we were talking about this a little bit in the store today. So I should say right now, we're going to talk about animal stuff that might not be completely kid friendly for a little while. Because, uh, spoiler alert, Karen was in the store today to sign books and we already got going on stuff. But we were talking about the fact that, I mean, and some of this is just in general, like anytime you start setting any of these creatures, it's
Oh,
just wild.
yes.
So it doesn't have to be, not safe for work stuff. It can be
It's
anything.
just that one
Like tell
thing.
me some of the things that were just like, oh, maybe some of the things that because you talked about, like, growing up near the beach, your parents grew up near the beach, so you've been going for a long time. What were some of the things that you discovered while researching for this book that you were just like, oh my gosh, I never knew that?
Um, well, I'll focus on the safe for work ones. Because, they're in the, I mean, there are a ton of things that I learned and found out. And one of them actually isn't even like a fun fact thing, but it hits me every time I think about it, to the point where like I almost tear up, is pelicans. Because I
Mm,
am old enough that when I was a kid, there were no pelicans.
yeah, I
And
remember.
it's like I wrote in the Look at That Bird, I wrote about DDT and the effect that it had on eggshells, and that all the mom and dad birds were crushing their eggs until we figured out, oh wait, DDT is terrible. Let's not use that anymore. Pelicans were one of those birds, and we almost wiped them out. There were like 1,000 left. There it was we I would never have seen a pelican on the beach. And now if you go to the Pacific coast,
Yeah.
there are thousands of them, and you
Yeah.
can look out and you can watch them hunting, and you can see them do all their cool pelicans. They'll yawn. There are people that there's like a myth on the internet that says that when a pelican gets hot, it sticks its backbone out through its mouth. That's not true, but it looks like it when they yawn. And there is a picture in this book that I have of a pelican doing just that. So it's yawning all big, and its pouch pushes back against its spine, and it pushes out, and it looks for all the world like it's shoving its spine out through its mouth.
How
It's really
interesting.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Another one that I think is really cool is sea urchins. Okay. Hold on. I don't have a sea
Oh,
urchin here, but
yay.
for some reason I have a koosh
Oh,
ball.
that's awesome.
Okay, so sea urchins are these, but in the ocean, for anybody who's watching
Yes. Yeah.
not familiar. Okay, so they have spikes on the outside of them. When they are born, and so almost everything cool on the shore, well, not, I mean, all the things other than birds, they're born as a larva like insects are, and so they go through different phases where they change into something completely different. uh so a sea urchin looks like a spiny ball. It is an animal. On the bottom, it has a little mouth that's called an Aristotle's lantern, and it has 5 teeth.
Cool.
And when it takes a bite, it looks like a star. It's so cool. It's part of a group of animals that have something star shaped about them. So they're cousins with sea stars, for
That's
example.
cool.
But the thing I think is the coolest about a sea urchin is when it's in its larval phase and is floating around out on the water, it forms these spikes inside out. The spikes are pointing in, and it floats
Interesting.
around, growing its spikes inside itself, and then it has a sort of a similar to a smell sense. It's not the same, it's a chemical receptor, but when it senses that it's near the shore and it's near other urchins, it it sticks a foot out and it flips its body inside out, and so then the spikes are on the outside, which, right, is so
That is
cool.
wacky.
Like, I really, just the things, I mean, there are jellyfish that really never die.
Yeah.
They go to the bottom, they kind of bud a new part of themselves, they go back up. Oh, here's one of my favorite things that I think is great and weird and cool. Okay, so this is a little bit hard to see, but these are anemones. And
Oh, tight up, all tight up. It looks like not out.
but these are closed up. They're up out of the
Yeah,
water. But
yeah.
I'm going to
Okay.
tell you a thing about these that I think is cool. Okay, as a kid, yes, I spent my life, sea anemones are cool because you can touch them and then they grab your finger and that's really fun. And they can't hurt you because human skin is very strong and protective. But they're animals and they will, thinking you're prey, grab onto you, which is fun if you do it gently. You make sure your hands are wet and don't have any sunscreen on because they don't like chemicals. They'll do that. But what is cooler, even than that, is these are called aggregating anemones, and they're if you go, for example, to Haystack Rock, um, these will be all over the little rocks that are around it that they keep telling you not to stand on. The
Yes,
reason
yeah,
they don't want you to stand on them is because there are thousands of other of these living on the rocks,
yeah.
right? You don't want to stand on those. But what's cool about these is one of the ways that anemones reproduce, they can reproduce with egg and like
Yeah.
that, which is also interesting to try to write about for kids, but I do
Yes.
it in a gentle way. There's not a whole lot. We don't discuss sperm. We talk about eggs. There are eggs. Lots of these animals, like they'll just broadcast
Right.
eggs and sperm into the water, much like a fish. But in this case, another way they reproduce is they divide their body in half, so like a cell kind of. So they clone
Yeah,
themselves
yeah.
by ripping in half, and so the clones of one, like in this one, you can see all of these are like light pink down here in the water where
Mhm.
they're open. These are all clones of one individual and they like each other and they hang out and they get along. This you can see is a different color down here in this water. These are all clones. These guys are all clones of a different individual and they like each other and they get along. They do not like each other. They have
Interesting.
wars. They fight. These guys get little white stinging cells and they battle each other and they leave like a no man's land. And you can see it if you know to look for it. So you can see
So that's what the crack is between
that
them.
crack is just a dividing line. And this is probably a third individual up here.
Yeah,
They're all the same species, but they're
yeah.
different individuals. It's like I made copies of myself and I like me, and then my brother or my sister made copies of themselves and they like them, and we do not get along. And so there's a no man's
The
land between
line.
them,
Oh, now
which
I'm
is
gonna have to
super
look for
great.
that. That's very cool.
See? And that is the kind of stuff that this book
Yeah,
has. It's
yeah,
all stuff like that.
yeah. So go buy it.
So yeah, go get it.
Yay. Yeah. No, I was trying to think. So how do you, so I mean, this comes back to what we talked about earlier because it is explaining, it comes back to explaining things in a way that kids will understand without over explaining.
Right.
But I know some of the conversations I have with people are because some people will come into the store and say, "Oh, well, I have a fifth grader and they're reading at like a ninth grade reading level," which
Right.
happens a lot. Like, the
Oh,
kids who are
absolutely.
good readers. And I have to try to explain to them that reading level isn't just about, like, if a book is designated middle grade, it doesn't necessarily just talk about reading level. It's also talking about content level. And so when you're writing for middle grade, as
Hmm.
opposed to high school or for
Oh,
adults?
for sure.
Like, what are some of the decisions you make, not so much about how you explain stuff, but about what kinds of things do or don't go in?
That's a good question. Um, Again, a lot of my decision making was how cool is this? If it's cool, it needs to be in the book. If it's
Yeah,
less cool, we may need to still have some less cool stuff in because it's there and you want to know about that. I mean, and really maybe something I don't find as fascinating may fascinate somebody, right? And
yeah,
I was telling
yeah,
you in the store earlier, barnacles, which I actually do find super fascinating. A lot of people don't even realize they're animals. They just think they're little rock volcano things.
yeah, yeah,
Step on them, right? But they're related to crabs. And when the barnacle larvae is floating around out there, uh, they they find the shore eventually through those sensory organs, and they glue down face down on the ground onto the rock or the whale or whatever they get stuck to,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then they grab food with their feet. And I have pictures of, and what's amazing, and I will get back to what we were talking about, but like what's amazing to me is you've got this thing that most people think of as like either a pest or something you scrape off of your boat or whatever. But if you get a chance to see even the tiny acorn barnacles, I mean, there are big barnacles and there are gooseneck barnacles that are just amazing and really cool. But even the tiny little
Little tiny
ones
white ones.
that are
Yeah,
on the little white ones, right? That you're like,
yeah,
if you get a chance to see that, like in a little shallow puddle of water, you can watch their little feet. They're called
yes,
cirri,
yes.
grabbing food. It looks like eyelashes. They're coming
Yeah,
out of their shell. And it's just
yeah.
amazing.
It is amazing.
So
And I think the thing that's funny is I didn't know those were feet. Like I didn't know that was the bottom end.
that is their bottom,
I
right?
love to watch them because if you watch when they're above the line above the tide line and then they go
Right.
below it, like, of course they're closed up all tight, and then as soon as the water comes up, those little feet come out. But
Exactly.
I
Watching
didn't know it was
feet.
their forehead stuck to the ground,
Their
and that
forehead
seems
gets glue, and you get that
poor
glue.
thing.
The glue is so strong. It's one of those natural substances that scientists spend a lot of time studying and saying,
Yeah,
okay, how can we use this or how can we reproduce this in some way? Sort of like they do with spider silk and a lot of other things that happen out
yeah,
in
yeah.
nature. The glue that barnacles glue themselves down to is really strong. So yeah, they're stuck.
That's why you can't get them off your boat.
Yes, right. Or the whales or the crabs. I
Yes,
mean,
yeah,
they stick themselves to anything that's hard without
yeah,
necessarily. I mean, there are some barnacles that are more invasive, but most of the time
yeah.
it's not that big of a deal.
They're just kind of like, yeah, this is where I want to
Yeah,
live.
this is where I live
There's
now.
good food here.
Right, exactly. I think I'm losing my light.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know I am too. I'm like, now it's getting dark.
I'm like,
Oh
okay.
well, that's
Except for
okay.
I was facing the window, so it's okay. Now we have my husband's cats all nicely in. There you go.
So jumping back to the
Thank you.
why, how you choose what
Oh,
you're
how
going
do I
to.
choose? Well, okay, so I need to be, I first of all, I have concepts I want to work through, and I want to build concepts with specific examples. So if there's kind of a category I want to cover, I would choose those. There were some topics like we talked about with the barnacles that you just leave out for kids. So
Yeah,
for
yeah.
example, the can I say it on the
Oh
thing?
yeah. I mean, I do actually mark that it's not that kids couldn't watch it, but I do mark specifically in YouTube that this is
Yeah.
content not made for children.
Well, and it's not
So
even
that
that
so that
they
we don't
couldn't.
catch people out. Yeah.
Well, and my kids wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah,
I
mine
have
would
two
have too,
boys,
but
and they would have loved this part. But it's telling you that like barnacles, because they're glued down face down, and they are still animals that need to be reproduced. They have the longest penis for their body size in the whole animal kingdom. Not it. Yeah. So
yes,
compared to their body
proportionally.
size, so
Proportionally. Yes.
proportionally, I was trying to explain that to
Yeah.
somebody once, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, like bigger than a whale." I'm like, "That's not exactly right," but
No, no, proportional.
proportionally, because they have to
Yeah.
reproduce while staying where they are, so they
Yeah.
have to go
Yeah.
next door without going next door. And that's a thing that I think is fascinating, but I am going to
Yeah.
leave out
Yeah.
because
Right.
we
Right.
want the kids to be able to read it.
Yeah.
I left out I did very consciously choose to describe the reproduction of each of these animals honestly and explaining how they reproduce without discussing
Yeah.
sperm and
Yeah.
eggs and those things, because I just think
Right.
that there are kids who would know that by the time they read it, and there are kids who don't, and I don't want to
Yeah.
confuse kids. So
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things that can be read by any kid of any level. If you want to read this to your 5 year old, they're not going to be super
Yes.
confused.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think that what that ends up being is it's not that we euphemize or we use incorrect terms or whatever. We just don't go into like super huge detail about it.
and they
So
don't
that
necessarily need to go
and
there.
I don't think it's so much that we think they can't handle it. It's
Right.
more just being sensitive to the fact that not every parent, I mean, I think that really what it becomes more about the even than
Exactly.
the kids being able to handle it is that not every parent wants their kids
Exactly. And
dead.
all families are
But
different and
yeah,
what they want. So, one of the things that I consciously did in this was try to be mindful of what different families would want their kids exposed to. So,
yeah,
I
yeah,
purposely chose things that were kid appropriate for the age
yes,
level
yeah,
that I was
yeah,
choosing.
yeah,
But also, um, I'm just thinking for the middle, again, concepts, trying to get in the coolest things and keeping what I did choose. And it is self-limiting with as many photos as I wanted to get in, the amount of words. It's like,
yeah,
oh, I need to
yeah.
say this. And then,
Right,
it
right.
self-limits anyway, what you can choose and not choose.
And
Um,
I actually think that's good because I think that bite-sized chunks, again, I mean, it's another reason why I think these books can often be really good for YA and adults is that you get the gist of it. You have an image and you have information and you can go on the beach and you can see this animal and you can go, "Oh my gosh, that's that. Look at this cool fact about it." You're not getting overwhelmed. And you get excited. And honestly, the kids that are going to get really into it are going to go get that next book. They're going to go check out that adult field guide because they want to know more. And that's
exactly.
kind of, I don't know for about you. For me, that's secretly what I'm hoping that everybody will do. But I know
Exactly.
there's
Right.
some kids that will, and that's super
And
exciting.
you need a starting place. And this is
Yeah,
your
yeah,
starting place, is what this is meant to be.
yeah.
So
That's exciting. So you said that you have more ideas. I always try to end up when we're kind of closing things down do you have anything that you're working on that you can talk about yet? Or is it in early enough stages that you're not able to say
everything's super
anything?
early days.
Yeah, yeah,
I will tell you a couple of, I mean, I've talked with the publisher about a couple of different things. We haven't come to a decision about what the next book will be. I would suspect that how this book ends up selling will
right.
drive some of that. Um, I think initially when I started with the bird book, we were looking at individual type of animal, like one book, one type of animal, which is a very different experience than
Yeah.
putting a
Then
book about
this one.
this many
Yeah.
animals. Is a lot. Um,
Yes.
but then there's another direction that we could go, which would be more biome
Yeah.
based and
Yeah.
environmentally based. So instead of a book about a specific, like amphibians, maybe we would do a book about northwest rainforests, that
That
kind of
would be
thing,
very
and
cool. Yeah.
all of the plants and animals and fungus and bugs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a conversation that's going to have to wait
Yeah.
until we weigh how this one
Yes.
does.
So everybody go buy it so there can be more.
And go to your local
Yeah.
independent bookstores and buy it at there and order it there and do that. Or go to your library too.
Why, thank you. I did not coach her to say that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fundamental. That is what we
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bookstores are my happy place. Well, and outside. So
Yes.
I have to be
Yes.
inside
Both of
books.
them. Yeah. Reading a book outside. There we go. So I will close up by one more thing. I would love to know. Well, let's do two more. One is I would love to know if you might share, let's just say 2 to 3 places that you think are really good for beginners to go if they want to see some of these animals?
For sure. Okay, and I'm thinking, I mean, there are some really lovely places that require either like a lot more care. I mean, and
Yeah, yeah,
caution than I'm comfortable suggesting to kids, even though
right,
they're
right.
amazing. Especially like there's one up in Washington that is probably my favorite tide pooling place. But um, if I were going with beginners, if I were going with kids, obviously Haystack Rock, like I said,
Yeah,
you're gonna do your best if you have helpers. Look for the helpers, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in those cases, you're gonna have rangers, you're gonna have volunteers. A second place is if you go down, and I'm sorry, a bunch of these are in Oregon because I mean,
That's
but you're
okay. Yeah,
border.
yeah,
It's just, I would say actually for you guys, the Oregon beaches are going to be closer anyway than
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of the outer
yeah.
shore beaches for,
If
I
we
mean,
get someone watching from, Salish Sea or North Washington coast, that
well,
these probably won't apply. But yeah,
there
I think
are
for
amazing places up there
most
too.
of us in Clark County
Yeah.
are, like Cannon Beach is very
Okay, so
accessible.
we have Cannon Beach, but then if you go south from there, in Newport, there's a place called Cobble Beach that's just down from the Aquina Head Lighthouse. So you
Okay.
go into that area and you go down, there's a staircase, and there are often rangers there, and they have like display boards and they teach you about
Oh,
things
cool.
and have
Yeah.
things out. And for one thing, it's a protected marine garden, much like Haystack Rock, which means you've got to be extra careful. You can't hurt the animals, you can't take away shells, you can't take away things that you find in that area specifically. There are other places you can, but not in the
Right.
marine gardens that are protected. And so Cobble Beach is like that, but it's also entirely different from Haystack Rock. It does have its own giant craggy rocks out in the surf
Yeah.
that are very cool. And you can see seals and sea lions. I've even seen whales just off the shore.
Yeah.
And then they have the Cobble Beach is named after the rocks that are on the beach that are these round rocks that make a really cool kind of rolling sound when the water comes in. And they
Oh,
have
neat.
an
Yeah.
amazing assortment of specifically the sea urchins and some other really cool animals that you don't see as often up north in like Cannon Beach area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, One of the other things that's kind of cool if you as you go even further south, if you get down to like Florence, Oregon, and down there, you're going to see a lot of fossils, which is another thing I mentioned briefly in the book. But there are animals encased in rock that are 15 to 30 million years old right along the
Mm,
shore. You can pick up and take home fossils that you find, and they are so cool. And
yeah.
there are
Yeah.
beaches down by Florence that are just covered in fossils. So easy for kids to find,
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
reinforcing. And also you can see the dunes down there, which is what
Yeah.
the guy who wrote Dune based the book on, was the
Yeah. The
dune,
Oregon dunes.
Oregon
Yeah.
dunes.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. But the Salish Sea is also, if you go up to Puget
Yes.
Sound, you're going to find there are some creatures in here in this book that are super cool, super amazing. If you go up to, for example, Edmonds Beach, that's just along the coast, a little bit north of Seattle. So it's a little bit of a hike for other people. I love that area. One of the things that I found there was something called Lewis's moon snail. And if you've never seen one, the shells are about this big and
Oh,
the
wow.
scales come down, and they're the biggest thing you've ever seen. They inflate the foot of the snail with water, and it's this giant gushy snail awesomeness, and they're amazing. There's a
That's
couple photos in
very
the book
cool.
of that,
Yeah.
and that is something you can see along Puget Sound,
Yeah.
and their egg cases and those types of things you can see up there too.
I need to get up there. I know of people who go nudibranch hunting too on
And
the in
nudibranchs.
that area. And I didn't realize that you could see them on Cannon Beach. So I'm super excited about that because that's
Yes,
close
you can
to the
see them
park.
on Cannon Beach.
So
Yes.
yeah. All
Okay.
right. Thank you so, so much. It has been about 50 minutes. We should probably wrap.
Thank you
I
so much
figured
for
I
me.
figured this was going to happen. I'm like, we're going to get to talking and we're just
I
going
have
to
so much to say.
go. But thank you so much for talking to us tonight. Can you hold up the book? I know it's a little, we're
I
both
am
sitting
so
in the
dark.
darkness again, but
Okay, here I
yes,
am.
it is on shelves today, and I hope that you'll all come out and get it. And like I said, it really is like, I know we're sitting here trying to plug it because it's such a great book, but it really is good for all different ages. And if you, especially if you're like, find this super fascinating, but you haven't really gotten into it before, honestly, for me, I always almost always start with this age of book because it's just easy to jump into something new when you have a straightforward description. So there's great stuff in the book. So come and get it. We have signed copies. So and thank you again, Karen, so much. A couple announcements before I hang up. We have a live event in the store on Saturday, and I just want to plug that so everybody knows that we are doing it. It's going to be with Emmeline Duncan and Angela M. Sanders, and she, both of them are cozy mystery writers. And so we're going to have them in the store. They've got brand new books out that they'll read from, and we will chat with them for a little bit, and then people can get their book signed. So we're really excited about that. 3 o'clock on Saturday in the store. So join us for that. And thank you again, Karen.